Picture the moment when something goes wrong with your car. That dreaded moment, you hear a weird noise or your check engine light comes on and you instantly want to turn your music up and pretend not to notice because you know what those signs mean. Taking your car to a shop, being out of a vehicle for a while, and getting a big bill at the end of it all. But what if, when those things happened, you were 200,000 miles from home? And that car shop, they're speaking to you over a radio, trying to explain how to fix your car and get it successfully moving again without actually being able to see it. Oh, and the best part? You have 2 hours until you run out of oxygen and power. If you haven't guessed by now, we're not talking about cars anymore. We're talking about a spaceship. A ship that experienced a severe systems malfunction while on course to the moon. And we're talking about the crew on that ship who wanted only one thing: to get back home. I'm Christiana.
And I'm Bree.
Settle in Radio Houston.
Because you're about to hear something strange.
Welcome to episode 39, Apollo 13.
I was so enamored that I forgot to grab my microphone.
Good. Excellent. This is what I aim for. So I do want to put a quick trigger warning in here. There's not really going to be a lot of horrible, I shouldn't say not a lot of horrible stuff that happens, but there's not really any gory or that kind of horrible. But I am going to do a very brief mention of discussions of death due to fire.
This is probably our shortest trigger warning in a long time.
Yes.
Wait till you see the trigger warning for my April episode.
Oh, I'm excited.
It's a little bit...
that's...
It's almost as bad as the length of the trigger warning for Hawk Mountain.
Oh, okay.
It's a little bit of everything.
All right. We love this for us. So, do you know anything about Apollo 13 before I dive into this?
I know it had malfunctions.
It sure did.
I don't know much.
It's been a day, guys.
I don't know much about the individual Apollo missions. I know there were reports of UFOs with the Apollo missions.
I didn't see anything with this one, but there was a lot of other stuff going on. They probably could have had an alien knocking at their door and they would have been like...
They would have been like, please fix this. I feel like for some of the Apollo missions, because the Apollo were the moon missions. Mm-hmm. Got that right.
Yeah, you did.
Which one made it to the moon?
Yes, we'll talk about that, but Apollo 11 was the first to land on the moon.
Do you know how I know what year the moon was landed on?
What is that?
The Even Stevens musical episode.
I love that.
They went to the moon in 1969. It really was a lunar landing.
Really was.
Have you seen that episode?
Yes. Okay. A long time ago.
That is the only reason I know that.
I just remember, what's the matter with Ren? That's a core memory. Core memory unlocked.
But besides that, I don't know a whole lot other than there are apparently alien sightings, supposedly, allegedly, from some of the Apollo missions. But yeah, they've been like, come here, fix this. So
I'm excited. I'm going to try not to give anything away as I'm telling this story because it's a really cool story. Have you ever watched the movie Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks? Yeah, I haven't watched it in I don't know if I've ever actually sat all the way through the movie Apollo 13. I know I've seen at least bits and pieces of it. But I actually just rented it out of the library after writing this script, and I'm going to have a movie night this weekend. Fun. So, yes. So I'm going to just jump in here, and we already kind of talked about this a little bit, but the Apollo missions were the moon missions, and I'm going to do a very brief overview of the space race. If I try to do any kind of deep dive into this, it will turn into Apollo 13 part 1 of blah, 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 same as Titanic. We don't need that again. Sorry, guys. So on May 25th, 1961, President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, stated the following quote to a joint session of Congress. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. This quote set off what is known today as the space race. This was a race between the United States and the Soviet Union to be the most advanced nation in exploring outer space. Kennedy's main reason for this was to beat the Soviets as opposed to exploration of space for knowledge's sake. And there were a couple reasons for this. The Soviet Union was successful in launching a man into space before America was successfully able to do so, which that really was a driving force for Kennedy.
They launched him into space. Did they bring him back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're just floating out there.
Yeah, I think I'm assuming I didn't do much research into this. I'm assuming he probably did like an Earth orbit, and then came back or something.
And they say that if you listen closely, you can still hear the sound of Russian cursing.
He's like, "Get me out of here!" We're also, for all the people that might be worried, I'm not talking about the dogs.
Oh, good.
I'm not going there.
I know a lot about the dogs, and I'm happy we're not going there.
I'm not talking about any of the animals.
It's sad.
Humans suck. And I'm not taking that back. Other things were happening around this time in history that also drove this race. So America was coming out of the Cold War with the Soviets, and America's failed invasion of Cuba happened at the time. So Kennedy kind of felt like he needed to do something to help his administration look stronger. The race began with the Mercury missions, and then they were followed by the Gemini missions. And Gemini was followed up by the Apollo missions, where our journey begins here. So what exactly were the Apollo missions? They were meant to actually land humans on the surface of the moon. So the Mercury and Gemini were kind of leading to this moment. The goals of the Apollo missions were as follows, and I directly copy and pasted these from NASA's website because it was kind of hard to paraphrase these. So, number 1, establishing the technology to meet other national interests in space, achieving preeminence in space for the United States, carrying out a program of scientific exploration of the moon, and finally, developing human capability to work in the lunar environment. So I want to talk a little bit about the Apollo spacecraft, basically how these ships were made, because they were a little bit different from the Geminis. They were a little bigger, for one, but not by much. The Apollo craft were made up of 3 separate components. There was the command module, and this is where the crew lived as well as where their flight control center was. And this is the only part of the craft that is meant to return to the surface of the Earth. The rest of it is jettisoned. For the Apollo mission, the Apollo 13 mission, specifically, the control module was known as Odyssey. There was the service module, which provided propulsion for the craft, as well as basically everything that was needed to support it. So all the support systems, power, fuel cells, etc. And then there was the lunar module. And this module was meant to carry 2 of the crew members to the moon's surface, support them while on the moon, and then carry them back to the command module and the service module. Once in space, the command module was meant to disconnect from the rocket, the 3rd stage of the rocket. So that's the part that propelled the ship out of the atmosphere. It was kind of do a U-turn and then redock directly to the lunar module. So it was a very complicated process. For the Apollo 13 mission, the lunar module was known as Aquarius, but oftentimes people would refer, because they'll abbreviate it the CM versus the LM or the SM for the service module. So they would call it the LEM, which I thought was cute. I heard that a lot. I say heard that because there's a documentary on Netflix that I really recommend. It's called Apollo 13 Survival. And that was what I used for a lot of my research. And it is a documentary put together of news clips and interviews from the astronauts themselves afterwards, and it's excellent. So they called it the LEM. How did this spacecraft actually get out into space? This required a 3-stage launch vehicle, in this case, a Saturn V rocket. The first stage launches the ship off of the face of the Earth, so it gets them in the air. The second stage gets the craft into Earth's orbit. And the 3rd stage gets the craft sent on the way to the moon itself, so breaks it out of the orbit.
So it does it in intervals because they wouldn't have the power to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think sort of. And as well, it's a lot of weight for one engine. Mm-hmm. So like the first engine goes and then that one breaks off. Mm-hmm. And then the second stage engine goes and breaks off. And then finally the 3rd stage. And it all just kind of, I would assume at least the 3rd stage would burn up on re-entry because that's getting you out of the atmosphere. But the other 2, I guess, just kind of fall back down to Earth. It was a little confusing. And I did not want to get too deep. So, and it's also, so like when that first stage rocket breaks off, that's less weight that has to get into the atmosphere. And then It's very interesting.
Because breaking our atmosphere would probably be the hardest part. Once you're in space, there's zero gravity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, there is zero gravity. Is that how that works?
Yep.
Okay.
No gravity.
No gravity. But I'd imagine getting out of our...
You have to punch out. Yep. All the parts of the rocket would eventually dump off the craft rather than being dragged around through space, kind of like we just discussed. Again, I'm going to try to be brief here about the Apollo missions themselves. I do want to give a brief timeline of some of the missions of particular interest. This is where my trigger warning is going to come in when we start talking about Apollo 1, so just a heads up. There were originally meant to be 17 Apollo missions, but that number dwindled to 15. Apollo 1 was the first, and then it jumped to Apollos 4 through 17. So what about 2 and 3? Well,
I was just going to say, they're doing like Star Wars numbers.
Yes, they are. These missions were canceled after a pretty horrible disaster with Apollo 1.
Yeah.
So again, trigger warning, guys. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's pretty bad. On January 27th, 1967, the crew of Apollo 1 were all killed after a fire started in the command module of the craft during a test on the launch pad. And this occurred just a month before their mission was set to begin. Crew's names were Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaff. And they were trapped in the craft. It started in the command module and they couldn't get out.
That has to be terrifying.
It was awful. It was an awful tragedy. I won't go too deep into this. I didn't do like specific research into this, but like what I've gathered from bits and pieces is like it really shook people because this was kind of starting to become, I'd almost say like not casual, but there were just certain things that it was becoming more comfortable to go into space. And I think that might have played a little bit of a role in this. But they had to completely re-engineer the door so that it opened from the inside because that was the thing is they literally could not open the door. So it was really bad. It's really rough. And do not look up pictures, friends.
Is there something about like the Apollo missions being cursed?
I don't know about that.
There's like something ringing in my head, but I don't know if that's something else.
I'm not sure because the other ones were successful.
A couple of them were cursed.
Yes, two specifically. But yeah, like Apollo 11, we'll talk about that. Mm-hmm. But that was a very, very successful mission. Mm-hmm. Apollo 12 was successful after that. And then there were multiple pretty successful missions after Apollo 13. So, but as I said, this disaster caused the Apollo command modules to be completely reworked, re-engineered, and it postponed these missions until this new module was cleared for flight. And the Apollo missions picked up just under a year later in November of 1967 with Apollo 4. And this was an uncrewed mission that tested whether the Saturn V rocket, which was the rocket used to launch the Apollo missions into space, were powerful enough to do what was needed, like to get the ships up there, as well as testing whether the team at Kennedy Space Center was capable of launching such a powerful rocket.
Like you mean the ground team?
Yes, mission control. Yep.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah. Fast forward, Apollo 11 was the first mission to land on the moon. This gave us the famous quote from Edwin Buzz Aldrin, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." This successful mission was followed by Apollo 12, which was America's second successful lunar landing. So what about Apollo 13? Apollo 13 was a mission meant to land men on the moon for the third time. And for this mission, the team was meant to explore the Frau Mauro region of the moon. I think that's how that's pronounced. It's FRA space MAURO. I'm going to talk about the people behind this mission. These are all going to be names that are come up a lot. First is the crew, James Jim Lovell, mission commander for the Apollo 13 mission. Jim started his career in flight as a test pilot for the U.S. Navy and was recruited for NASA from there. He was recruited by NASA in 1962 and was originally part of the Gemini 7 and 12 missions. Gemini 7 was his first space flight, and he had also been a part of the Apollo 8 mission. Jim was married to his high school sweetheart, Marilyn. They had 4 children together, and he actually wanted to name a mountain peak on the moon Mount Marilyn after his wife because he's precious.
You know what? Like no, like no one's gonna top that.
No.
What did your husband get you for Valentine's Day?
Oh, a mountain
on the moon.
On the moon that he's actually seen.
Puts flowers away and puts flowers down and walks away.
Right.
Goddamn, Jim, we can't.
Damn it, Jim.
Stop making it.
Yeah. Stop making this impossible. Apollo 13 was actually going to be his fourth and last mission with NASA. Fred Hayes was the lunar module pilot for Apollo 13, the LEM pilot. He began his career as a naval aviation cadet and then served as a fighter pilot in the Marines. And he joined NASA as a test pilot in 1959, and then in 1966 was chosen to take part in the manned space program. And Ken Mattingly, he was selected to be the command module pilot for Apollo 13. Like the other two members, he began his career in the military. He joined the U.S. Navy before joining the Air Force Aerospace Research Pilot School. He was then chosen in 1966 by NASA to be an astronaut. Unfortunately, or not, depending on how you want to look at it, Ken received some bad news before the Apollo 13 mission was set to launch. He found out he had been exposed to German measles and had to be taken off the crew. And this was only 3 days before the flight was meant to launch.
I imagine they had, I almost said understudies. I imagine they had
essentially
but
like a backup crew.
Can you imagine that? Like, I can imagine you'd be so upset, and then what happens, and it's like, just kidding.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So while the launch could have been delayed, it would have been a huge financial loss, and the flight had already been postponed once before. So it was decided that Ken would be replaced as the command module pilot, but he did stay at Mission Control in Houston to help.
Was he contagious?
He ended up never getting sick. So he was exposed to it, but he never got sick.
Okay.
But I think they took him off the mission because, like, if you get sick in space like that, that's going to be a big problem.
You're up a creek without a paddle, yeah.
Yes, and you're those other two guys on board with you as well.
Yeah.
Right. And measles is no joke, friends. My mother had measles one time, and it was terrible. Not while I was alive, but she's told me stories, and it was terrible. So enter Jack Swigert. He replaced Ken Mattingly as the command module pilot. He was a pilot for the Air Force in Japan and Korea, as well, or the United States Air Force, to be clear, in Japan and Korea, as well as a commercial test pilot. He started his career as an astronaut in 1966 and found out he'd be joining the Apollo crew the day before launch.
Pack your bags, buddy. We are getting on a spaceship.
Get in looser. We're going to the moon.
You know what? I hope that's exactly what they told him. Got knocked on the door. Hey, Jack, get in loser. We're going to the moon. He'll be like, yeah, okay, guys. No, for real. We're going to the moon.
Like, seriously. I also want to talk about Mission Control. This is Mission Control at this time was at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston. And this was the heart of the Apollo missions. And honestly, it's the heart of space missions to this day. Today, the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston is the Johnson Space Center. 24/7 flight controllers are stationed at Mission Control to monitor the systems on the spacecraft and assist the astronauts aboard with any issues that may occur. These are teams of 19 controllers, and they're in charge of getting the ship where it needs to go, getting it back to Earth safely. And these teams are supported by engineers and scientists and are connected to tracking stations worldwide. All the members of Mission Control are highly, highly valuable to the safety of these missions. But the leader of all of these controllers are the flight directors. For the Apollo 13 mission, the guy we're going to be zeroing in on is Eugene, aka Gene Kranz. He was our guy. Gene began his career as an aeronautical engineer, a fighter pilot, and flight test expert. He joined NASA in 1960, where he was a flight director for multiple missions.
Man, what a resume.
Yeah, all these guys are like, you guys are incredible. I also want to mention the name Glenn S. I believe it's Glenn, Glynn S. Lunny. He is an also important name here. He was another flight director on a different team of controllers. So these guys worked in shifts because obviously you can't have someone there nonstop without sleep.
Oh, no, not ethically.
Not ethically.
That would be like, if they do fall asleep on the clock, that could be major, major bad.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We've talked about the ships. We've talked about the crew. It is time for blast off.
Yay.
Yay. April 11th of 1970 was the big day. At 2:13 p.m., Apollo 13 and its 3 crew members blasted off of the Earth's surface at a velocity of 1,500 feet per second. There was a problem almost right away at the start of the launch, however. The number 5 engine on the second stage of the rocket shut down early, which meant the remaining engines had to burn longer to make up for the missing engine. On the second stage, the remaining engines had to burn for 34 seconds longer. And then on the third stage, the engines had to burn 9 seconds longer than planned. And Houston couldn't tell the crew of Apollo why this had happened. No one was really sure why.
They couldn't tell them because they didn't know, not because they couldn't reach them.
But, right, they didn't know. Yeah, because I'm assuming there's a blackout. Well, we'll talk about a blackout period here. This got me towards the end of the episode. I'm assuming there's some form of blackout period exiting the Earth's atmosphere as well as entering. But then they had access full communications the whole time once you're out of that blackout period.
Is that due to the magnetic field, or just how dense the atmosphere is at that point?
It's something with like the ions breaking up. It messes with radio systems.
Oh, yes, the ionosphere.
Yes, the ionosphere.
I don't know what's in the ionosphere, but like I know that is part of the atmosphere.
Yeah, again, this is one of those, I didn't go that deep into it because this would be Apollo 13 part 365.
It's like, obviously my area of knowledge does, like, I love space. It's so fascinating.
It's interesting.
But I don't know about near space.
Yeah. No,
or
not
like
so much.
or like the top of the Earth's atmosphere. Like I know more about the inside of the Earth.
Right.
Where the dinosaurs live, according to Journey to the Center of the Earth.
You're right.
I'm just kidding. I don't think there's dinosaurs inside the Earth.
No, I don't think
I don't think it's flat or hollow. I'm sorry.
It's a big ball of iron.
It's a big ball of iron. It's a big ball of
metal
and
hot stuff.
Yeah.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it. It'll hurt.
No matter how bad you want to, do not touch the stuff in the middle of the Earth.
Do not lick the science.
Do not lick the science.
Oh, man. So despite the issue, the remaining engines continued to work well, and the crew were able to reach Earth's orbit. And after those instances, Apollo's flight was pretty normal. Nearly 47 hours into the flight, one of the flight controllers at Mission Control, Joe Kerwin, was quoted on a message to Apollo: "The spacecraft is in real good shape as far as we're concerned. We're bored to tears down here."
Good Lord, that is a horrible thing to say because you're jinxing yourself.
I was like, Joe, don't say that. Also, I think I kind of misspoke a little bit earlier. I said despite the issue, the ship was able to reach orbit. They were able to reach orbit, but then like push out of Earth's atmosphere, not just floating around the Earth, because we are on our way to the moon here.
They got a little shove to help yeet them out of the Earth.
Yeet. Third stage went, get out.
Get out.
On April 13th, 1970, the astronauts took part in a TV broadcast that was shown back on Earth, where they were able to show off the interior of the lunar and command modules. And the craft was projected to enter the moon's orbit within a day of this broadcast, where they would stay for 33 hours. And they were planned to make, I believe, 2 lunar landings.
How long was it supposed to take to get from the Earth to the moon?
I do not remember how long that journey was. It was 4 days that they needed to get back. But I don't believe it was maybe like 2 days.
Can you get to the moon faster than you can drive to California?
Maybe.
Yeah, probably, actually.
Probably.
So, therefore, the moon is... No, I'm just kidding.
The moon is closer than California.
I'm just kidding, guys. I know that's not true.
The Earth is also flat.
I'm just being a smart ass.
Same. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, though, so don't quote me on that. Well, actually... I guess it makes, so we blasted off on the 11th. This was April 13th.
Oh, we're gonna do math.
So that was 2 days later. So maybe like 2.5, 3 days to get to the moon, something like that.
Do you think the moon's in a different time zone?
Probably.
Like what time? Lunar time.
Lunar time.
You know what? That actually probably is a thing.
Yeah,
running on lunar time.
Running on lunar time.
Maybe that's why I don't sleep. Maybe I run on lunar time.
Maybe it could be.
You know, I didn't get jet lag going to or from California because my sleep schedule is that messed up.
Oh, no.
I'm not kidding.
Oh. So after this broadcast, Mission Control was walking the crew through a pre-sleep checklist. This was stuff that they had to do every day, just kind of general ship maintenance, craft maintenance, if you will. As the oxygen and hydrogen tanks in the SM, the service module, were being stirred, the crew heard a bang.
That can't be good.
No. A second or two later, several alert lights came on, including the master alert, and Mission Control also began receiving some strange data from the craft.
That also doesn't sound good.
No. A sudden flurry of alarms led to the now infamous phrase. Any guesses?
Houston, we have a problem.
Correct. And I'm not talking about the movie a lot here, but I do want to just mention this because I think it's kind of interesting. If you've watched the movie Apollo 13, starring Tom Hanks, you're probably very familiar with this phrase. I mean, it's one that is used regularly, I feel like, in a lot of people's lexicons. Just in
Their vernacular.
Their vernacular, yeah.
Lexicon sounds fancier.
Lexicon.
We're going to bring out all the SAT words for the rest of the episode.
It's not worth a continental.
It's not worth a continental. It's easier than selling cats to the Caribbean.
Easier than selling cats to the Caribbean. Coal to Newcastle. This is actually not the Houston, we have a problem is not actually the entirely correct phrase. It's close. It's very, very close.
Like all
Slightly.
like all of the Bible ones we talk about sometimes.
Correct. And it was also not Jim Lovell that initially said this, like is shown in the movie. Tom Hanks plays the mission commander, Jim Lovell. The origin of this phrase was actually Jack Swigert, the command module pilot, who called mission control initially after all these alarm lights started flashing, and his words were, "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here."
That's close. They just condensed it.
It's very close. Yeah, and it makes sense for the movie. And then Houston responded to Jack by asking him to repeat what he said, and he said this time it was actually Jack Lovell that replied to mission control, "Houston, we've had a problem here." So it was very, very close. I understand why they condensed it for the movie because it was,
they kind of like put it together too. Like they took both and they kind of like
yes, yeah,
scooch them together.
Exactly. And then there was also a follow-up to that quote by Jim when he said, "We've had a main B bus undervolt." I'm not going to go into buses or undervoltage or anything. It's a lot. I was very confused trying to read all this. It's a lot of engineering and kind of jargon. So what was actually happening on this ship, on this spacecraft?
On this vessel.
What the astronauts were seeing was a drop in voltage to the service module and command module, which set off one of the sensors. As to what had actually caused it, the crew wasn't really sure. They thought they might have been hit by a meteorite.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I guess that is something that could happen in space, though.
Yeah. Like a random...
I didn't think about that. That's worse than hitting a deer.
Yeah. Yep. And then mission control thought it could have been an instrumentation problem because they were like, something is just really like, it was dropping power and then I think kind of like behaving normally and then dropping power again. This is one of the fuel cells. And they were like, this has got to be something wrong with our instruments. This has just got to be some kind of like really weird glitch here. As they were trying to figure out the problem over the next 14 minutes, other malfunctions started to occur as well. Warning lights lit up that showed 2 defunct fuel cells. There were only 3 fuel cells on the craft, and these were the main source of electricity on this Apollo creature. Sorry, I was saying craft too many times, and it was like, ugh. At this point, Lovell called back down to mission control and said the following quote, "We are venting something out into space." And that something was a gaseous substance.
Oh, no.
He also relayed to mission control that the number 2 oxygen tank read 0. The substance being vented into the craft turned out to be oxygen coming from the number 1 oxygen tank. So to sum up, the crew of Apollo 13 had only one of 2 oxygen tanks that was rapidly depleting and only one of 3 fuel cells still online. At the rate things were going, the crew would have 2 hours before they lost oxygen and power in the control module.
That's not... Oh.
That's bad.
It's horrifying.
At this point, Houston and the Apollo crew were in a race against the clock to figure out the best way to get the crew home. The lunar landing was forfeited. Instead, the new plan was to have the ship enter the moon's orbit, make a loop around behind the moon, and then use the lunar module's descent propulsion system to blast them back towards the Earth. And this descent propulsion system was originally meant to land 2 of the crew on the moon's surface and then propel them back to the control module. To loop around the moon, they had to slightly course correct from their original trajectory. The way I understood this was they were coming in to like a shallower orbit around the moon because they were going to land. So they were on one particular trajectory to get into a shallower orbit. The shallower orbit, they needed to go on a wider orbit, so a little bit further out.
Because they needed the gravity of the moon to like slingshot them.
So they actually were going, instead of closer to the moon, they were going farther away from it.
Yeah, because the gravity field might be further where they were hitting it. Is that?
Well, this is very confusing. So I'm sorry, listeners. I'm doing my best to explain this. It was, if you think about, you know what the infinity symbol looks like? If the Earth is on one side and the moon is over here. They started off like down here on the Earth, came up, and they were going to go around the moon this way. This wider orbit would land them in a better position
To get back, okay.
where they needed to be. Because I think it was like if they followed the shallower trajectory, the shallower orbit, they were going to land in like the Indian Ocean.
Oh.
But they needed to land in the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
So it's if I recommend, I fast forwarded a little bit through some of this to answer that question. I recommend looking at the article on NASA's website. It's 50 years ago. Houston, we've had a problem. To better understand this, they have a graphic on there that makes this a lot easier to understand. It's hard to say it in like when we don't really have a good visual medium unless we put this clip on the internet.
Well, and like it sounds like a lot of very, very advanced math going on too.
Yes. And they weren't doing this on computers. They were hand checking this arithmetic, which is insane.
Like it was the people in control.
Yes. And then at one point they had to do something on the ship. This was part of the
I'd be dead.
I know. I was like, this is insane. Like these men, I literally tip my hat to these guys because they are freaking brilliant. Just brilliant human beings. I'm so impressed.
I'm imagining you have to take advanced math to be an astronaut.
Oh yeah.
Like you just have to, because if something goes wrong, you're kind of like on your own.
Like arithmetic, engineering, flight mechanics. Like there's just so much. They're brilliant. It was also decided that the control module would be completely shut down and the lunar module powered up. Because as to right now, everything is in the like the power and everything is going to the control module because that's where they're at currently. And then the lunar module originally wouldn't have been powered up until they were ready to land on the moon. While the control module and the service module were looking in pretty dire straits, the lunar module seemed okay. And the idea of using the LEM as a kind of quote-unquote lifeboat started to come to the forefront of everyone's minds. And this was not a simple task. For one, the lunar module could not be used to return the crew to Earth. The control module was the only part of the ship meant to return to the planet. That being said, the crew would need to conserve enough power to eventually power the control module back up to return them home. Also, the lunar module was only meant to support 2 crewmen, not 3, and definitely not over the space of 4 days, the amount of time it would take for them to get home.
It was supposed to be 33 hours originally, right?
They were, I think, 33 hours from the moon.
I didn't know if that was like once they got to the moon, or was it?
No, that was at the time of the explosion. I think they were 33 hours out from the moon.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood that. Sorry.
That's okay. All this being said, they needed to figure out the minimum amount of power it would take to sustain life on the craft. LEM pilot Fred Hayes thought it was a good idea to try and use what they could from the LM supply. Most urgently needed for survival were, of course, oxygen, power, water, and filtration to remove CO2 from the air. I want to quickly sum up again here. Some kind of severe malfunction happened. The crew and mission control realized that the craft was rapidly losing power and oxygen. They had to come up with a plan to, 1, change course to get home as quickly as possible. 2, find out how to stretch all the things needed to maintain life aboard over 4 days when they were looking at a supply of 2 days. Power up the lunar module to make sure all of its systems were up and running correctly. And then 4, power down the control module all in the space of 2 hours. 15 minutes before their 2 hours were up. After the lunar module had successfully been powered up, Jim Lovell and Fred Hayes sequestered themselves in the LEM while Jack Swigert powered down the control module as quickly as he could. Thankfully, the crew was able to power down CM and power up the LM just in time.
Like basically in the 11th hour.
Yes. They were like by the skin of their teeth. Despite imminent death no longer looming over them, the crew of Apollo 13 was far from out of the woods. They had a few hours of waiting as their craft looped around the moon, and then another controlled burn of the descent propulsion system was needed to blast the crew back away from the moon and towards home. The crew had a successful 5-minute burn after curving around the back of the moon, which did at least slightly increase their chance of successfully getting home. And while, again, they didn't land on the moon, they were able to, get a good look at it. And Jim Lovell, I believe, was the only person aboard who had seen the moon up close before. So the other two, this was like their chance to really be able to take it in.
I mean, that's still really cool.
It's incredible. Yeah. After the successful burn, the crew faced a 3-day flight back to Earth. They powered down as many systems as they could in the lunar module while still being able to survive. Water and power consumption were the two most pressing matters at the moment. Mission Control was able to figure out a way for the control module batteries to be charged with the lunar module batteries. Because remember, the CM needed power to return. And also anything that would draw power on the lunar module was turned off so that only a fifth of the energy on the lunar module was being consumed. Water was a concern not only for hydration, but also cooling the ship's engines. So to help conserve, Jim, Jack, and Fred each only drank about 6 ounces a day. And they also they tried to hydrate in other ways. So like eating wet pack foods like hot dogs, and they drank fruit juices, but naturally they all still became extremely dehydrated. Thing that thankfully wasn't too much of an issue was breathing oxygen. At this point, the O2 tanks on the LM were enough to support the crew. So there were also 2 full packs of oxygen meant to be used by the astronauts on their lunar walk. So if all else failed, they could literally put on like a backpack with air, kind of like a scuba tank. Mm-hmm. And then they had spare air tanks as well. So this wasn't too big of a deal. What was a problem was that the crew's breathing was literally poisoning the air.
That would be problematic.
Correct. The CO2 filters in the lunar module were, again, only meant to work for 2 people, 2 crew members, not 3, and for a maximum of 2 days. They thought, okay, why don't we switch them out with the control module CO2 filters? Well, that wasn't going to work because the control module lithium hydroxide filters were square versus the ones in the LM, which were round. So back at Mission Control, teams are rushing around trying to figure this problem out, and they were able to come up with a way to fix this problem. They mocked up a makeshift adapter using things that the Apollo crew would have had available to them. So like plastic bags, spacesuit hoses, duct tape, that kind of thing.
That's like barn logic.
It is.
It really is. Like, I wasn't making a joke there. That's literally what barn logic is like. It's like, okay, what do we have in here to make this work? Because
if they were a horse crew, they would have been using baling twine.
That's what I was going to say too. Baling twine. Zip ties.
Zip ties. They mocked up this apparatus to filter air through the control module filters into the spaces where the where the lunar module filters were meant to fit. Carefully following Mission Control's instructions, the Apollo 13 crew were successfully able to create one of these filters to solve the CO2 crisis. I imagine this would have been temporary, but enough to get them back home.
I feel like with each success, there's probably like, but we don't want to celebrate.
Yeah, because they're still they're 200,000 miles from home.
They're still like kind of SOL.
Yep.
They're up.
One thing goes wrong, we're not getting home. Or one more thing goes wrong.
Good Lord.
I also want to add in here, back at Mission Control, on the backup crew of Apollo 13, and now including Ken Mattingly, were helping to try and come up with a solution for the crew in space. They had a control module simulator that this crew, the backup crew and Ken, were working frantically to try and do anything they could to help their fellow astronauts, which is just, that's incredible to me. And there are pictures. If you go on, I linked all my notes, all my references in the show notes, as we always do. But if you go on NASA's website and look at any of these articles, you'll see pictures of Ken. And I can't imagine how he was feeling. It's one of those, like, there's got to be some sense of relief because it's like, oh my God, I dodged a bullet. But then also thinking about Jack is up there. Jack Swiggert's up there replacing me. And now he's there because some kind of like survivor's guilt almost. It's just wild to me. Wild to think about.
That has to,
like, how do you feel? Like
how do you process that?
Right. And I imagine it was like you couldn't process it at the time, really, because you're just frantically doing everything in your power to try and get these guys home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like one thing you're not going to have time to think about how you feel. It's after, I imagine afterwards.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this was not the end to the issues the crew would face on their journey home.
Are we sure this mission wasn't cursed?
It was Apollo 13.
I mean, that number choices, instead of skipping 2 and 3, maybe we should have skipped 13.
Yeah. There was one of these issues was there was a tropical storm.
It's like not even, it's like God, God is like, how can I make this even
as hard as I can?
It's like
correct.
Someone got a little bit too into playing like The Sims or some kind like that. It's like you ever play Zoo Tycoon? And yes. When
set the lions loose.
Well, my one friend, when the expansion packs, when someone would give the zoo bad review, she'd put them in the saber-toothed tiger.
Yes.
Enclosure.
Yes.
Did you know that if you made an enclosure and called it Xanadu, you could get a unicorn?
I'm dead.
There was a way to get Bigfoot too. I don't remember what it was.
Oh, that's amazing. Bigfoot's my man.
Oh, I was excited about the unicorn. Xanadu.
I'm excited about the unicorn too, but I would have been jazzed to have Bigfoot. He doesn't belong in a zoo though.
I neither do unicorns.
That's true. That's true.
I knew like a lot of the cheats for Zoo Tycoon and for The Sims. Good. Did you play either of those?
I didn't play The Sims. I did play Zoo Tycoon.
Did I ever tell you about? Sorry, this is like not related at all. Did I ever tell you about the time when like I made these two Sims and I made them fall in love, and then someone died at their wedding? And the Grim Reaper showed up.
Oh no! Oh no! I write sins, not tragedies.
Like playing in Simish in the background.
Yes.
All right, anyways, back to Apollo. Back to the cursed space mission instead of my cursed Sims relationship.
So one of these problems wasn't actually on the ship itself. It was at their landing site where Tropical Storm Helen was brewing up. And it was right in the area where they were supposed to splash down in the ocean.
Of course.
Right.
Why wouldn't there be a hurricane? That's probably what they were saying. Like, of course there's a hurricane.
Of fucking course there's
a hurricane. Why wouldn't there be a hurricane?
Right. There was also condensation building up everywhere because, again, they turned off as much as they could. So, like, ventilation, electricity that ran the ship also helped the ship stay warm. So it was getting very, very cold. It was around like 38 degrees Fahrenheit due to, like I said, many of the electrical systems being off. The crew got very, very, very little sleep, for one, stress, but it was also just cold. And they weren't up there with the stuff to they didn't have warm weather clothing. I mean, they had their uniforms, but that was it. And then Houston noticed that something was causing the spacecraft to drift slightly off course.
Of course.
Of course. This was a big problem because if the craft's trajectory was off and the craft came in too shallow to the Earth's atmosphere for landing, it would essentially just bounce off the atmosphere and send the ship just kind of into space rather than punching through the atmosphere.
That would not be good.
No. That would be absolutely a disaster. The crew would need to perform another manual burn of the rocket for 14 seconds without their computer, guidance system, or autopilot, since, again, they're all powered down.
Good Lord.
They had this sort of kind of like a gun sight in the LM that they lined up with the Earth, and they used the planet as their trajectory. Jim and Fred had to try and quite literally keep the Earth in their sights, while Jack timed the burn on his wristwatch. Once again, the crew pulled this off. They pulled off a spectacular feat. They performed this manual burn successfully and got the craft back on the correct course. So thank God. Again, the resilience of these men, just hats off. I can't say it enough. As they grew closer to Earth and a hopefully successful re-entry and touchdown, another problem came up. Jim Lovell started getting sick. He had a bad UTI, a fever of 104 degrees. He was severely dehydrated, just like the rest of them.
Is that because of like the conditions they were in?
Yeah. It just kind of was, one thing led to another. I saw something. I think Fred potentially had a UTI as well.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was just not good.
What a place to have a UTI.
Right. But thankfully, one thing was good. The weather on their re-entry position was starting to clear, which was a huge relief that they would not be dropping down in the center of a freaking hurricane. Oh my God.
They're probably like, you know what?
Like at that point, like
give me the fucking hurricane.
Give me honestly, yeah. As much as they had survived up to this point, they were probably like, bring it, go ahead.
We'll aim for the eye. It'll be fine.
Yep, exactly.
Oh my God.
So re-entry was the final hurdle that these astronauts would need to face before finally splashing back down to Earth. The sequence itself was already tricky, but now the astronauts were, of course, in completely unprecedented circumstances. The service module where the explosion occurred was dead. The command module was on limited power and currently powered down. In the process of getting ready for re-entry, service module and lunar module would need to break off from the CM. They would need to be jettisoned. The process would start with powering the CM back up. Unsure how this would go after being, it was in very cold, clammy temperatures for 4 days straight, being shut down. There was condensation literally everywhere, all over the walls, all over their instruments, presumably behind the walls. I mean, it was just everywhere. And thankfully, by some miracle, this power up was successful.
Okay.
It went smoothly. And then the dead service module was jettisoned. And this is where the astronauts got some kind of idea of what might have occurred here.
It was supposed to be jettisoned. That module was supposed to be jettisoned.
The service module, yeah, okay. Yes. Yep. The crew so they jettisoned it, and they kind of were like looking out the windows of the command module to try and get a look at it to figure out what the heck exactly was going on, because they couldn't see it from their spot in the ship while it was still attached to it. And they saw a side of the module had been completely blown out.
Oh,
and not good. Based on this, it was concluded that some form of explosion had been the catalyst of all the issues the crew had been facing. And then finally, it was time to jettison the lifeboat itself, the LEM. And Fred Hayes is quoted as saying, "You could watch it slowly drifting away. I was sad to see it go." And then one of the controllers back in mission control was quoted as saying, "Farewell, Aquarius. We thank you."
This is so sad.
It is. It's emotional.
It is emotional.
Because it was truly, without that, they would have died.
Yeah.
So it just, and I believe both of those parts did re-enter Earth's atmosphere. I think they were in Earth's gravitational pull at this point, even though they weren't in the atmosphere yet. So they both did come back to Earth, but they burned up.
I was going to ask, is there any
no remains of those two? After all of this, the crew was finally ready to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down into the Pacific Ocean. And I've said before that the control module was the only part of the Apollo craft meant to return to Earth. And the reason being, the heat of re-entering Earth's atmosphere is 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And the control module had a heat shield capable of withstanding that heat and protecting the astronauts inside. However, there was the question of if the heat shield was still in working order since the service module was underneath of it when the explosion occurred. Yes. And then we mentioned this earlier. I'm going to go into a little more about it now. A communications blackout occurs on reentry because the atmosphere messes with radio waves, like I'm assuming, like the upper atmosphere, I'm assuming. And this blackout lasts for a little over 3.5 minutes. Mission control for this time would have no idea if the crew was alive or not.
That's been the longest 3 minutes in history.
Longest 3 minutes of your life. Yep. And despite entering the atmosphere at thousands of miles an hour, they were expected to hit the water at 22 miles an hour due to a 3 parachute system that would drastically slow their descent. So they're not just like rocketing into the Earth's core. The re-entry was a little shallower than predicted, but Apollo 13 did breathe through its atmosphere. They didn't bounce off of it. So one part successful at least. And as Apollo 13 re-entered the atmosphere, Mission Control waited what I am sure was the longest 3.5 minutes of their lives.
3.5 minutes? It wasn't 3 minutes?
Yep, 3.5 minutes of their lives to see if the crew had made it through. And flight director Looney, I'm sorry, I think it's actually pronounced Lunny. I'm so sorry.
If it was Looney, that would be really, really cool because like lunar.
That's true. It's Lunney, so I'm not sure if it's Lunny or Looney. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But he was quoted as saying, this is a direct quote from the documentary again. It was an intensely lonely period. The crew's on their own and they're left with the data that you gave them. Each controller is going back through everything they did during the mission. And was I right? And that's the only question on their mind. Once the time period was up, the message was sent from Mission Control, Odyssey, Houston, standing by. And then after a little while, Odyssey, Houston. And then after another torturous minute and 30 seconds, Jack Swigert finally replied, "Okay, Joe." They made it home.
Like, I'm sorry. So it's like, hey, we did it. Okay.
Okay, Joe.
Okay, Joe.
What do you say at that point? Yep, we didn't burn alive. We're all still here.
Guess who?
So, guess who's back? Apollo's back. Don't send us out again.
Like, we are never leaving. Like, I'm not even getting an airplane after this.
Right? I mean, like, insane. So they waited that 3.5 minutes, and then they had to wait another 1.5 minutes before they finally got anything back from Apollo. So it was, what is that, like, for like 5-6 minutes?
That's a long 5-6 minutes.
Oh my God. After a flight of 142 hours, 54 minutes, and 41 seconds, Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes were finally back on Earth, safe, splashing down within a mile of the estimated target.
That's pretty good.
It is excellent. And they were recovered from the ocean by the USS Iwo Jima. The astronauts flew home to a massive celebration of everyone at Mission Control. Oh, yeah. And of course, to a loving reunion with their families. Susan Lovell, one of Jim's daughters, was quoted as saying, "I really wasn't relieved until I actually saw him and got to hug him. You know, just to know that he was real and he survived this." And then Jack Swigert was quoted. This was, there was a video clip again in this documentary. I really highly recommend it. It's great. They were like making speeches on the runway when they got home. Jack Swigert said, "Of all the welcomes home that we've had, this one means the most because it was these people here that made it possible for me to be here tonight."
That's
like brings like a lump to your throat.
It does.
It's like, oh man. Swigert later stated that Apollo 13 did something that's never happened before in the history of man, that for a brief instant of time, the whole world was together. And they really were, because countries around the world were following this mission. And there's news clips of different, just news stations all over the world that were listening into this and just hoping and praying and keeping their fingers crossed and sending good vibes and just desperately wanting these 3 astronauts to get home safe. And it truly was a together moment for this planet. So what caused the explosion? I'm going to straight up quote the article from NASA here because I'm not going to lie, when I was finishing this research, my brain was so saturated with information, I could not figure out how to paraphrase it. So this is a long paragraph. Here we go. Apollo 13 mission details. This is the article. After an intensive investigation, the Apollo 13 Accident Review Board identified the cause of the explosion. In 1965, the control module had undergone many improvements that included raising the permissible voltage to the heaters in the oxygen tanks from 28 to 65 volts DC. Unfortunately, the thermostatic switches on these heaters weren't modified to suit the change. During one final test on the launch pad, the heaters were on for a long period of time. This subjected the wiring in the vicinity of the heaters to very high temperatures, 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which have been subsequently shown to severely degrade Teflon insulation. The thermostatic switches started to open while powered by 65 volts DC and were probably welded shut. Furthermore, other warning signs during the testing went unheeded, and the tank, damaged from the 8 hours of overheating, was a potential bomb the next time it was filled with oxygen. That bomb exploded on April 13th, 1970, 200,000 miles from Earth.
That is such a...
So that's a paragraph.
That is...
So essentially, issues with the wiring that was not fixed, and the oxygen tank just couldn't take the damage that it had taken. It couldn't take the heat, and it literally exploded. And then it damaged things around it, which caused even more issues. So what happened after? The crew of Apollo 13 hold the record for farthest humans have traveled in space at 248,655 miles at their farthest point from when they were looping behind the moon. Apollo 13 was indeed Jim Lovell's last mission.
I don't blame him.
Not at all.
No.
He left NASA on March 1st, 1973. He and Marilyn were married for 71 years until her passing in 2023. And Jim himself actually recently passed in 2025 on August 7th. And he was 97 years old.
Good for him.
Yeah. Fred Hayes was assigned to the Space Shuttle program in 1977 when the Apollo program closed. He left NASA 2 years later and then continued to work at the Grumman Aerospace Corporation until his retirement in 1996. Jack Swigert became executive director of the Committee on Science and Technology for the U.S. House of Representatives in 1973. He resigned from both that committee and NASA in 1977. And in 1978, he ran for a seat in Senate but was unsuccessful. However, in 1982, he was elected into the House of Representatives. But sadly, Jim passed away from cancer before he was able to ever take that office.
Oh, that's very sad.
I know. Ken Mattingly went on to become control module pilot for Apollo 16, as well as commander on Space Shuttle missions STS-4 and STS-51C. And he passed away on November of 2023.
I can't imagine anyone affiliated with this mission ever wanting to get into a spaceship again.
I know. These men are incredible.
I feel like they have to know on some level that like they could die.
Yes, absolutely.
But I can't. I'm like, I wouldn't even want to get on an airplane after that.
I know. They're just. I wish I could have just seen like all of their reactions, because I just can't imagine the just outpouring of joy. It had to have been just so infectious. But especially with Ken, just like that relief of like, my God, particularly this one man that took my place is like home and he's safe, and just thank anything that anyone holds holy.
No, for real. It's like, yeah, that
incredible. All right. But that is everything I have on Apollo 13 as quickly as I could do it.
You're just like, I'm not going to make this a 3-parter like Titanic.
I could have.
Space Titanic.
It could have been.
You know what?
Space
It could have been space. It could have been. If it did not go the way it did, it would have been Space Titanic.
Oh, it would have been. Yeah. Like there was just so many things that went wrong that could have just ended disastrously.
It quite literally was like Space Titanic.
Yeah. Well, and what's crazy, I had some of this in there, and then I actually ended up taking it out because I was afraid it was getting too long. But like, I didn't even talk about like the personal angle behind this, because this is actually really, really cool. The families of the astronauts had what were called squawk boxes in their house, where they could hear. It wasn't a two-way radio, but they could hear everything going on at all times inside. So like when shit hit the ceiling, they could have heard that. And bless Marilyn, if I remember correctly, I think she actually found out about the accident from the news. Because she went to Houston to watch. She was, since she was Jim Lovell's wife, they knew her at Mission Control. She was allowed to come in and sit in the viewing box to watch the television broadcast from Mission Control. And the accident occurred from when she left to when she got home.
Oh my goodness.
So she finds this out. She's got 4 kids. She's trying to keep it together. She's trying to keep her kids together. Like, it was insane.
What? I guess you wouldn't even tell, like, you know, like, he's fine, he's in space. Like,
yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Like, well, and I think she had I forget, I don't know exactly how old the kids were at this point. Susan, I remember from the documentary, like, was old enough that, like,
she would know what she would know.
she
what's
knew.
going on, yeah.
It was at least 2 of the older children that knew, if not 3. I'm not sure about the youngest.
How do you go about your day just knowing, like, your husband or father is...
May or may not. You've literally, if the worst were to happen, you might not ever even get their body back.
Yeah.
Like, it's just going to be floating in a void. Like,
that's a thought.
Insane. And this poor girl, at one point, she was told, according to the documentary, you know, kids at school were, I don't think they meant this. I think this was came from a place of compassion, but did not hit. There was a kid that came up to her in school and was like, "I'm so sorry your dad's going to die." Like, oh my God. Like, she had to leave school because she was like, "I can't do this."
Oh
like,
I'm like, surprised, you know, I'm so sorry to hear it, but like, it's
like, I think it genuinely did come from a place of compassion. Because, like, what do you say to someone in that? Like, I don't think, but it was just, it didn't land the way that poor kid, I think, meant for it to land.
oh my goodness.
So that's Apollo 13, guys. Do you have any closing thoughts?
It's very miraculous.
Yeah.
It was literally the worst possible luck ever. Mm-hmm. But they somehow were able to do the math and
get home.
Yeah. I can't imagine. I feel like you'd almost have to kind of not even let yourself kind of get past moment to moment.
Right. Exactly. And I think they kind of were in that. Like, I mean, because they were, you know, like I said, they were around orbiting the moon to get around to loop behind it. And, you know, they're taking photos of the moon. And I think Jim at one point even said, I feel like I remember this from the documentary, from a clip. He was like, "Hey, there's Mount Marilyn. Like, I can see Mount Marilyn in the distance."
That's so sweet.
I know. So crazy.
By the way, I did Google if there were UFO sightings. Mm-hmm. There was Apollo 11 apparently.
Oh.
And some of the Gemini
missions.
Yeah, and then there were some more modern space missions that there were supposed. That might be a fun snapshot.
I was literally, the brain cell passed between us because I was literally just about to say that. If anyone is interested in UFO sightings from any of these early space missions, let us know.
Yeah, so
please don't ask me to cover Apollo 1, though. I don't want to go into detail about Apollo 1.
Apollo 11, Gemini 4, Gemini 7.
Oh, Gemini 7. I think Jim was on that one. Or was he on 8?
During a spacewalk in the International Space Station, there was UFO.
Oh.
There was one in 2013. There was one by a cosmonaut in 2020.
Oh, okay.
It would probably be a pretty short snapshot, but...
Yeah. I just scrolled back up to my Jim Lovell was on Gemini 7, so I wonder if he
saw the aliens.
He saw the UFO or the aliens.
Well, we say snapshot, but they're just going to be full length anyways.
Yeah.
We can make it long.
We can make it long. They're still kind of snapshots because they're snapshots longer of pieces from our
other episodes.
Yeah. So that part's staying the same. But we're just dropping breadcrumbing lore here about our inner workings of our podcast.
I mean, they'll already know that by the time this comes out.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Because our first not snapshot is going to be your February.
Yes.
Non-shot?
Non-shot?
Non-alcoholic shot?
Our non-alcoholic shot.
A Caribbean cat.
A Caribbean cat. Yeah.
All right. Those were my thoughts. I'm about to break my alien rule.
Break your alien rule. Mm-hmm. There we go.
We're doing a UFO one.
Do you want to tackle that one, or do you want me to? If someone wants that as a snapshot,
well, I can put it in the vote.
Oh, okay.
Those were my thoughts. Do you have other thoughts? Questions? Oh yeah, we need to do those too, don't we? All right. What drew you to this topic?
So Apollo 13 is just a fascinating story. It's, I've said this before. I'll say it again. It's such a tale of resilience, and I just thought it would be really, really great to learn more about it, and really, really fun to learn more about it, which I learned a lot. I didn't know much at all about this. And it took me to some pretty crazy places, including the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum.
Yay.
Because I went there, I started researching this, and then I got a wild hair, and I was like, I could go to an actual museum and like talk to people about this and see what they have to say and look at exhibits. And so Chris and I, that was we just dropped that on the Instagram. Well, this will come out much later, but a couple months back, listeners, on our Instagram, I put pictures of us at the museum up and had a lot of fun with it. So, and this is also a little more of it's a scary story in a lot of ways, but it's much more uplifting because I tend to do some pretty dark stuff. So I wanted to break from that a little bit.
It had a happy ending.
Yes.
Was there anything that you wish you could have researched more into?
Direct quote that I wrote in these notes: "For the love of all things holy, don't let me do this."
I'll look
I
into
will
the
never
UFOs.
stop.
I'll look into the UFOs. It's fine.
Okay.
What did you find the most strange about this topic?
How Mission Control and the crew themselves were able to just remain so cool in the face of such serious danger and peril. Like, I cannot say this enough when I tip my hat to these people, because I would die.
like it would be over.
It would be all over for me.
All right.
But I think that wraps up our discussion on Apollo 13.
Yay.
We'd love to hear from you. If you have a suggestion for a strange or mysterious topic, a comment about an episode, or just want to chat, please reach out.
You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube. Comment directly on episodes on Spotify and YouTube, or leave a review of the podcast as a whole on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Find us on Instagram at something_strangepod, on Facebook at Something Strange Podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at something_strangepod, and check out our strange content over at TikTok at somethingstrangepod01.
You can also send us a Gmail at somethingstrangepod24@gmail.com, and the 24 is numeric. Well, strangers, it's time for us to part ways.
Until we meet again, always remember how cool astronauts are.
We'll be back again soon with another
Something Strange.
Joe, don't say that we're bored to tears. I love you. I know you didn't mean that way, but don't say that.
Ugh.
Every episode is a paranormal road trip where the GPS stopped working 5 minutes in.
If it bumps in the night or lurks in your basement, we probably already talked about it.
We're best friends, lifelong weirdos, and your guides through the haunted, the spooky, and the just plain cursed.
From cryptids to cursed objects, haunted history to haunted hairbrushes.
And probably a haunted dollar too along the way.
This is Not My Ghost, Not My Problem. Subscribe now.
Regret it later.
Blame the ghost.